And that's a drama. That is a really drama. The type of a blitzkrieg that Putin imagined to happen. We see rockets being sent to Ukraine, and of course the decision to deliver the tanks. So in that way, the West has become much stronger. Hi, here is Markku, Wilenius, your traveling future. This time we come to this our old topic, which is the relationship between the Russia and Ukraine in our times when Russia has attacked Ukraine. Now, as I speak here, it is 344 days behind of this war. It's almost a year. And what has happened? What has happened is that the type of a blitzkrieg that Putin imagined to happen have never materialized. It has become a very different type of war now. And there are heavy forces on the both sides, which means that nothing is happening very fast right at the moment. This is not necessarily so in the future. Because what has happened in the course of the last weeks, first of all, there came ultimately a West decision to help Ukraine in radically new ways. Because up until that point, NATO and other Western countries have been very, very, very cautious about sending anything to Ukraine that could be interpreted as something where Ukraine could use when they are moving forward. So it was basically said that everything that we provide for you is because you need to be defending yourself. And in addition to the arms, yes, humanitarian aid of all kinds. But now, this type of discourse has changed. Not completely, but almost completely, with the result that we see now the long-range rockets being sent to Ukraine, and of course the decision to deliver the tanks. Now we are also talking about that when will the first aircraft be delivered for the help of Ukraine. Also a sign that there is a definite move in how the West sees the risk about being confronted directly by Russia. And we can see that there are some historical reasons for that, because the war, first of all, has lingered so long, but also that there is a more impatience that has come from all sides, actually, to get the war to an end, to finish that, to start the next phase. Now, practically speaking, of course, that takes a huge amount of negotiations, huge amount of deliberations to make that happen. But there is a genuine will that is now appearing that we must end this war. And of course, before that, there is an idea that yes, the both parties want to be in the situation where they can take as much kind of advantage and the benefit of their strong position when the real negotiations start. But I think that this has already being kind of a demarcation line that we start to now look at the end of the war. What will happen between now and then when the war is finished? Very hard to say, but let's play out a couple of scenarios. The one scenario is that, well, these both kind of front lines stays roughly where they are now without being able to move either way. And this is continuing for a long time, and then finally comes some sort of agreement that, okay, we need to do something about it. We need to secure kind of both interests. The second is that even if the West is supporting, it's still the fact that the Russians have a huge amount of powers and superiority in their army, and Ukraine is a lot smaller country. And there might be also that there can be a shift, kind of a sway that enables Russians to move and secure their positions. And then, of course, Ukrainians have to acknowledge at some point that, okay, we cannot actually push them out, so we need to be making a deal with them, particularly because there is a danger that they invade actually more. Then the third scenario is something like this. Russia starts slowly to collapse internally because of a lot of the tensions that are between the Russian troops and then these mercenaries, this Wagner group. Also because it becomes much more apparent to the people in Russia that, well, this is a war that doesn't do any good for the country, and that there is a political opposition which actually now, as we speak, are trying to unite themselves and become a significant force inside the Russia. Of course, they are also preparing at the times when something happens inside the closest circles, inside the Kremlin, and then something triggers the fall of that regime. Because obviously that would be the moment then for the opposition who wants to secure the democracy and wants to secure that they can be the force that can sort of reunite Russia and reunite the Russia with the other part of the world, particularly the West. So they would maybe see that now the time has come and they would step in. And this could be combined with considerable losses in the battlefront as Ukraine, which slowly started to push themselves towards Crimea. And if that happens, that also will trigger quite certainly a huge disappointment inside the Russia and probably the dismantling of Putin's regime. So there are all kinds of possibilities here, and it's very hard to actually put any kind of a probability in each of these scenarios. But what I feel very strongly myself is that out of these three scenarios, the last one is the most probable one. And I explain you why I think about that. As I've been earlier stating, I see the world from the point of view of a futurist, and I am the guy that do not look any simple cause-effect relationships only. I look at the system that has feedback loops. So if something triggers something else, that might have much larger implications than what originally happened. And that happens particularly if there are weaknesses inside the system. And from my lenses, if I look at what is going on inside the Russia, I see the country that had been cut off and excluded a lot of its normal interaction with other countries, which is the essence of the modern societies, that we have those. And particularly when it comes to the economic ties, a lot of those ties have simply vanished because of the sanctions, because of this huge downgrade of relationship that war has actually caused between Russia and many of its former economic allies, like my own country, Finland. Let's take Finland, we have completely stopped. And historically, we have done a huge amount of collaboration in all fronts with Russia. And economy is not the least of that, but there has been also a lot of other types of social, cultural, technological, all kinds of stuff, financial. Now all that is mostly gone, and that's a drama. That is a really drama. That's drama for the Russia as it is for Finland, but we are not alone in this. There are so many other countries that similar effects have really happened. And this means that there is a lot of this kind of a not so clearly visible consequences and long-term consequences of this disruption that has taken place. And that's why I see, from my perspective, that the impact of all these changes inside Russia are just slowly becoming much more visible, and that would weaken the country, I would say, quite dramatically. Not the way that it happened in the last year, because the last year there was still a lot of buffers there, and of course Russia has, from its side, its own side, prepared for this war, so there were some considerable buffers. But now, particularly with the restrictions, with the oil and gas, and the sanctions and price caps, that has changed a picture completely, because those were the types of things that Russia did not, you could only almost say, could not anticipate. So they don't have that reservoir where they can draw to actually replace that flow of money that came to the country. That was, of course, essential part of the cashier for the war. Now, when we think about this, and I want to kind of underline here that here I speak as a futurist. When we look at it, we always see that when something of the trend like happen, because we are the experts of understanding the trends, when something of the trend start to take place, like in this case, the weakening of the Russian economy, the way it works is that it actually builds to itself. So what happened first ignites something else to happen that further aggregates the trend. So the trend intensifies. And so based on that sort of a basic observation, for me as a futurist, it's quite clear that this year will be dramatically different, particularly for Russia, but also for the West, because it was a great shock, particularly for Europe, that we were sort of cut off first from the gas of Russia slowly, and then for the oil, and now also from the more value-added products such as petroleum and others, oil derivatives. So, which all means that the West has changed. This building up this new capacity and resilience, and have other sources of raw material, for instance, has actually quite already happened. And so it means that this type of dependency that was there still in the last year is not anymore there, because the situation has changed. So in that way, the West has become much stronger. And when it is stronger, it can also more be in opposition to the war that the West doesn't like. So this type of the dynamism is there, and as I said, we cannot exactly know what will happen. That situation is too complex to be able to say that. My prediction is that most likely this last scenario of the downfall of the capacity of Russia to continue the war is most likely to happen. Now the question is, of course, well, in what time frame we are talking about here? I think the next 2 or 3 months will be decisive here, particularly if we go along this last scenario, because when something very dynamic starts to happen in the system, in case this system comprising this war between Russia and Ukraine, then the new constellation that is appearing will be a very different one to what we see today. If the balance of the force, the balance of the hubs in this system is changing. And while it doesn't look necessarily so, if you just look at the day-to-day kind of appearance of the war and what is happening there and the reportage, but if you take a little bit of longer-term view, then you start to define and discern these more kind of a groundbreaking, I would say, developments that is the undercurrent. So let's see what is going to happen. But from the point of view of, I would say, concerned futurists, my sincere wish is just that the war should end as soon as possible. Then that would be the good for the both parties. So let's hope that, but also let's be realistic about the chances that there are to actually do that. And when we will look this back from the future, the one thing that we will probably be able to see is that what really causes this type of the conflicts is not because the countries are different, because we all are different as individuals, as collectives, as countries, as regions. It's not about the difference of us, but it's more about how can we actually understand the others? What is our level of empathy? And the more we have that empathy, the more we can understand that actually the richness of our own country comes not that we are expanding ourselves as much as possible, but the richness comes from intensive collaboration with the other, which then becomes this kind of a reciprocal good. And I think that will be the key learning of this war, as it has been the key learning from most of the other wars, particularly World War II, when Europe realized that, well, the war is never going to produce anything else but the misery, but the collaboration, that will bring extremely nice results. And that was the fast track to happiness and success of Europe after the Second World War. Subscribe to my channel and let me know how do you think about my scenarios and my ideas about the end result of this conflict. I'm listening.